Galimera, Galispera, Galinichta. No matter where in this wild, wacky, and today it sure is a wonderful world you might be. Thank you for making the Highbury Squad part of your day. It's a new week, it's a blank canvas. It's time to tell stories and paint North London Demolition Derby pictures. Are you ready for this? I am.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
Good evening, squaddies. Happy Monday. At ease, everyone. At ease. Thank you for joining. I know you're having a happy Monday. There's no need to even ask if you're having a happy Monday. Looking good, dressed in black, smooth as always. Joining us, one of our residents now, Mr. Paul Buckle. Welcome back, Paul.
Hi, Sophie. Thanks for having me again.
It's a happy Monday, Paul. It's a very happy Monday if you're a Gooner. I mean, we know Manchester City won, but you know what you're going to do. We're going to get stuck into it in just a little bit. Let's say a good evening to some of the squaddies. Matty K in the house, who just sent me the most hilarious Jason Cundy, absolute rip down of Jamie O'Hara after the match. Wes Bird, hello. Ian, hello. Ianobia, hello. Tammy Steele's our chief like officer. Welcome. Be sure to make sure they hit the like button. PW, Yasso Diganis, Carol's here, QA is here, Carlos is here, Brady's Bananas here, Suraj is here, everyone's here. G Dog, it is a beautiful day. Gosh, is there a better feeling? Paul, you've been there as a player and as a manager. When you beat your rival, how long does that feeling last? As a player, I'm assuming it might last a little bit longer because as a manager, like you're looking to the next game, Mikel's already focused on Bournemouth.
Yeah, mate, it must be an amazing feeling for Mikel and the players at the training ground. The training ground will be a great place. When you win a derby in normal circumstances, it's fantastic. The bragging rights, the feel-good factor, the players, the staff would know what's on it. But to have this title push mixed in with it, I mean, yeah, it never matters how you win a derby. For sure, you just got to win it. And I think we're at that stage of the season now where it doesn't matter on the performance. You just got to win at all costs.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting you say that because all week I've been posting saying I don't care. I don't want critiques on performance, although we'll laud a couple of players on the show today, of course. I don't care about that. It's all about taking the 3 points, just the results right now. Is that something that Mikel's drilling into the team, do you think, if you take us into your manager mind?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that resilience and steel that's needed, he'll be drilling into them. There's no tougher game than a North London derby, so to get through. You know, Tottenham would have raised their game. You know, if you picture if Tottenham would have won that, I mean, that would have been, you know, triple whammy for them in terms of stopping Arsenal. It didn't happen. I think Gabriel's reaction when the VAR disallowed the goal, which was so tight, his reaction, well, you know, the fist pump, the now come on, wake up, because Arsenal at that moment, that was coming, I think, in the game. And I think that sort of showed, look, we're not going to let this go. There's a huge opportunity here for us right now, which City have shown they can take in the past, and Arsenal need to show that. And I thought that, for me, was the bit where it was like, you know, a leader there that you need on the field as a manager, saying, look, come on, let's kick on again now, which they did. And to get 3 goals deserved the game.
Before we get stuck into the plays a little bit more, Paul, I know, you know, you've, as an ex-manager of Luton and the work that you do, even now as a consultant for multiple clubs across the world, you know, the role of the manager just seems to get tougher and tougher. The instant gratification world that we live in, let alone in sports and the expectations of sports and the success. I wanted to touch on Mikel Arteta just a little bit. He's joined the 100 win club, which is an incredible achievement when you think about how young he is, how long he's been in the job, and actually when you compare the managers that he's up there with, you've got the quickest to 100 Premier League wins. Pep Guardiola 134, Mourinho 142, Klopp 159, Sir Alex Ferguson 162, Mikel Arteta overtaking Arsene Wenger. Yes, he hasn't won anything, but your football brain, does it tell you this guy's en route to winning a lot? I mean, Paul Merson talked about, at the weekend, which I thought was really interesting, saying that if you came up against Mike Tyson in his era in boxing, you were SOL basically, because no one was ever beaten Mike Tyson. And there's no doubt Manchester City are the Mike Tyson of football. But when you look at these names, what are you thinking?
Well, that's a great stat. And I think, Mikel Arteta will love looking at that. I don't care what anyone says. When you're a manager, you do self-evaluate. So, we know that it is about winning things, especially when you're in Mikel's position. But he's proving there that he can win games, and he can win games on a regular basis. So there's a lot involved in that. I've spoke about this before on the show that, them weeks leading up, suffering disappointment, getting back on it, picking the teams, all the things that Mikel has to do in his job, deal with the media. He's doing very well, very, very well, because it's not luck. Being with those, having those names around you there that you're seeing, and no more than Arsene Wenger, should give every Arsenal fan hope, not just for this season, for the future, because the future matters as well. It really does. I mean, you don't want to be chopping and changing. You don't want to win one title or get rid of Mikel over this. You've got a manager now that is a proven winner as a manager. And I think he's going to go on to great things. I know I'm always positive about him, but that's the truth. And that stat there is fantastic, because that highlights it, and that'll give him a lot of confidence.
And, when you do look at the fact that he's going up against Pep and Jurgen Klopp, and last season, not to be petty here, but last season everyone talked about how we choked and we bottled it. And Jamie Carragher's on TV talking about how Liverpool overachieved. It's always so interesting, the narrative of Mikel versus Klopp. As with your manager head on, if you're in Jurgen Klopp's position today, to me, it feels like, Liverpool had a great season. I don't like to call a team bottlers, but they certainly let it go when they, at 1.2, were in control, Paul. I mean, it just proves how hard it is to win this league.
Sure. Well, we spoke about, maybe 10 or 15 games ago, we spoke about when Klopp announced that was pretty unique. I'm not sure how many of the players have ever experienced that in a team that's pushing for a title, let alone in a normal season. And Klopp's never done it. So very difficult and different circumstances for him to manage. And look, he's leaving the club, and that must have an effect on the players. It must do, because they don't know who's coming in. The uncertainty's there. All of us, 1 second that, they are flying, they've got their manager, that manager signed them, they're doing very well in the league and cups, and all of a sudden he says he's going to leave. It doesn't matter which way you shape that, he's leaving. And the cracks are appearing now for Liverpool. And I thought they would. I thought that was going to be very, very difficult for him to navigate through the rest of the season with that. You're seeing problems with him and Mo Salah there on the side. And, of course, any Liverpool players or pundits going to try and cover it up. He's a bit biased there. But no, I think they've faltered at the end, for sure.
Yeah, I thought it was selfish when Megan Rapinoe announced her retirement before a World Cup, because it all became about her and her legacy. And I know people came, I tweeted about it and they said, "Oh, what do you expect? Someone was going to leak it." It's like, well, he could have kept it to himself until the end of the season. We've seen what's happened to clubs when they've got when legendary managers have gone. It didn't work out for Emery. It didn't work out for Moyes. Van Gaal won a trophy, got fired. Mourinho won 2. Got fired. Manchester United, though, in the league have been exceptionally poor, and Sir Alex Ferguson had earmarked Moisey for that role, Paul, as well. So for me, I just feel like it was poor. I don't know. I mean, I love it personally. I love that they failed and they're out of the title race. Mathematically, they can still do it. But I think that, it's definitely, there's something when you see Mo Salah and Jurgen Klopp arguing on the sideline, oof. As a manager, are you still letting him go on? I mean, I think some people are being a bit disrespectful to Mo Salah and maybe forgotten what he's done for Liverpool for the last 6.5 years.
Well, that whole dynamic you speak about there, you have your senior players, and none more than I would imagine Mo Salah. I don't know what his involvement is in the dressing room, but I would expect he's got quite an influence. The players are seeing that. There must be something fundamentally wrong now at the club. There must be, for that to happen, because your emotional control, those players, top level, would he reflect and want that to have been seen? Does he want that to end like this with him and Klopp? So something must have happened in there where, as I said, you're trying to push players and motivate players to stay and kick on, but you're not yourself. I'm not saying his mind's elsewhere, but it's certainly not on the club going forward. And I'm only talking, the only thing I can relate to, and Luton fans might remember this, when I was at Luton and Rebecca got the call out of the blue to come to America, that we were going to go. So we'd finished the cup run. The club wanted me to stay on to the end of the season. And I get that. I get that. I couldn't. I couldn't for a number of reasons. And one of them, it wouldn't have been fair. It just wouldn't have been fair to the players, to anyone, when I was leaving in a few months and I was emigrating. For me, the clean cut was needed immediately. And I wonder if Klopp would have gone, if say he would have gone and they'd have put another manager in, would that kick them on again? You never know. I mean, John Steele came in after me, got promoted the following year. I sort of was like, I'm done now. How can I lead the team when I know now that a lot of my efforts are going to be elsewhere? I'm not saying that with Jurgen, but that was a decision I made at the time. I had to leave my family. But again, thinking of the players in the club, that's important. And I think there'll be issues at the club now with players. Are they going to leave and they're going to stay? And the new manager coming in's got a big job, but there could be some players there that other clubs are looking at now to take on board in the window.
I'll take Van Dijk as a backup
Yeah.
to Saliba. And here's a player who we signed that we've talked a lot, Paul, about how some people questioned his arrival at the club, that he was a total waste of money. But my goodness, some of the squaddies will like this one. Thy Kingdom Kai. He has risen to the occasion, and to perform the way he did in this North London derby, when he knows he's constantly under pressure, he's going to be a player that is always under pressure. The pass to Saka was just sublime, very Odegaard-esque. He was the player of the match. He was definitely my player of the match, silencing the crowd once again, celebrating his teammates, just continuously looking joyous for him when he scores. He's a menace in the box. Arsenal fans love the fact that Arteta saw that, he's the answer to the number 9 role this season. And by the way, before this corner was taken, I want to play this one for the squaddies, because this too is joyous to watch. If you don't like... Sorry, I love it. I absolutely love it. I had to play it. It's just beyond joyous. The videos coming out of this North London derby, Paul, let me get this picture off, are absolutely priceless. That one in particular, the grin that Declan Rice gives the fans as he goes to take the corner and they're abusing him. Yeah. Oh, just brilliant. It's
They're
just
probably,
great, isn't it?
them fans are probably crying now, saying he shouldn't be doing that. He should be more professional. You know, it makes me laugh. You know, I mean, we've all had the abuse on the side. I've had it on the side many a times. But you know, if the goal goes in and you turn around and fist pump, oh, that's a great feeling. Rice,
It's
and for Rice to do that, I sort of like that as well. You know, he means it. He really means it. He was able to put that ball on a sixpence yet again. With them fans, that's a really good insight to what it looks like, you know, for a player in that moment, you know, to actually be getting all that stick, still have the quality to put the ball in, but then, you know, turn around. You just hear that silence. Oh, no, you know.
it's brilliant,
That's
isn't it?
yeah, absolutely.
And then Kai Havertz continuing to rise to the occasion, Paul. If he's your striker, you know, what are you saying to him today? Some in the chat are asking, yeah, but still, what is his best position? I think he's established that at the Arsenal, has he not?
I think he has. I mean, you've always, you know, in fairness to you, Sophie, you've been an admirer of him. I think if you look at it now, he probably was caught up in that bit when Mikel was chopping and changing the team. And he couldn't find his position. We spoke about, you know, those relationships with other players in the units, you know, the understanding that the players can get, you know, Saka and White now down the right side. He probably didn't have that. And now he looks very assured. He did at the weekend. He looked comfortable in his own skin. He looked calm. You see the reaction of the players there in that shot. They're pleased for him. Because if you go through a really rough patch as a player, it's difficult and you need your teammates. And it looks to me like the Arsenal players know what he can do. He's probably shown it in training, and it's maybe not coming off in the games. But they're being proven right. And I do think he is a striker. I think it is value to have players that can play in different positions, you know, if you do get pushed with injuries. But in a perfect world now, you'd have to say him leading the line with Odegaard off him. You know, Arsenal setting up it looked like, you know, 2 banks of 4 and a 2 against Tottenham. You know, and then when they're winning the ball, they've got that freedom to move into different positions. He looks very good now in an Arsenal shirt up top. I mean, the goals, what is it, 12 and 3 assists or 6 assists, should I say? It's not a great return. It would be if he was an 8. That's a really good return right now for an 8. You know, you're heading towards double figures in the goals, but given a full season up top, right up top, you'd think he'd get double figures playing like he is now.
So you're the manager. You've seen how, I mean, I think most Arsenal fans are kind of, if you look back and you think, oh, you know, okay, fine, the 2 Fulham games, the West Ham home game, Aston Villa, but him playing in midfield against Aston Villa, not playing him up top. I think Arteta might kick himself about that one. Is there a potential here that Kai Havertz could save the Arsenal millions and millions of pounds by not investing in a striker, maybe putting a lot of that money into the competition for Saka, which we'll talk about at the end of the show? You know, the left back position. If Thomas Partey is going to be let go, 250 grand a week, a year left. You know, do they look at keeping Thomas Partey? We'll get to that too. Centre back cover. If you're Mikel, what are you doing? Are you many Arsenal fans, the majority want a striker. But could Kai Havertz save the club a shit ton of money?
He could, but if you're going to compete on all fronts like Arsenal are going to, you're gonna need backup, and you're going to need competition for places as well. We know that resting and rotating now is a huge part of it. I don't think Mikel has had a good time with that, you know, based on what he's got at his disposal. So I do think Arsenal need another striker. Could they get away with Havertz? Yeah, but what about if he gets injured? You know, what about if he does need a rest? When was the last time he played a full season as a 9, or, you know, being the furthest up the field, with the way Arsenal press? So yeah, I think there's a lot to come into it, and I would say absolutely, looking at it, they need another striker. You know, if you look at the Premier League now of who would be available or overseas, it's not easy. I know one, and I don't want to give Arsenal a kiss of death. I think Solanke would be a really
season. Is he one of those that's like a 1 season wonder? Because he's promised a lot, Solanke, but this year he's definitely delivered, and more so than Ivan Toney. But Ivan Toney, of course, had his ban for a bit of time. But Solanke, we're facing this weekend. He does scare me a little bit. What do you see in him, Paul?
Well, I think he's got everything. I've always liked him. The last few seasons, he's really caught my eye. You know, you watch still as a former manager, I look at players, say, yeah, I like that player. Why do I like that player? Well, he's playing in a team that's fighting for their lives all the time. He's up top. He can play the lone role, which I think suits a lot of teams now, especially Arsenal, where you can pack the midfield. Good in the air, good in both boxes. And 18 goals is a big return. And I mean, that's a big return. And sometimes when you're identifying players to come in your recruitment, you know, it could be a perfect time for him. And he's, you know, what's his pedigree? Liverpool and Chelsea. You know, so they've all sort of looked at him and thought, you know, absolutely a top player. I think sometimes in recruitment you can look at that and say, actually, now he's really started to blossom. And I think he has, and he's a natural finisher. One of the things I like about him, they're all different types of finishes with him, and he works hard, works really hard. And I think if you're Solanke, I think he'd be almost praying for an opportunity now. The age he's at and where he is in his career, and like I say, 18 goals and I think 6 assists that he's got. He's pretty good. Actually, it's 3 assists. Yeah, I wrote it down because I said again, talking for these shows, I always speak to Bex, and I was like, Solanke. She told me that he used to be at Liverpool and Chelsea. I didn't know that. And
yeah, he was, and he didn't do well.
Right, and you know, when you look at, so like, this is all I can say is like, so when I was recruiting players, right, say my first job at Torquay, we wanted development players. A kid called Ewan O'Kane, right, he was a kid at the time. Everton didn't want him. Moyes liked him, but there was no place for him. And a lot of clubs turned him down. And I saw something in him immediately and took him and developed him. And he went back in the end. You know, Bournemouth bought him. And he went back to have a career in the Premier League and internationally with the Republic of Ireland, right? No one would have seen that when he was at Torquay, right, in League Two. But I think this applies now with somebody like a Solanke that's had the pedigree, that's been there and has had to go to Bournemouth. And there's no disrespect to Bournemouth, right? It's not Liverpool or Chelsea. And now might have a point to prove at a big club like Arsenal.
Interesting. We're going to see. It's going to be a very, very busy summer. Another player who showed up, who's had a little bit of a dip in form, is Bukayo. Just incredible performance yesterday. Talk about keep your cool. The control and the touch from the Havertz pass and then the finish was just absolutely delicious. It's time to stop calling him Star Boy. Apparently, he doesn't really like being called Star Boy anyway. That's just what I've heard. And, you know, just an amazing performance again in a North London derby. He seems to enjoy and rises to the occasion. Did a brilliant job yesterday. He had his moment too when he went to take the corner for the Højbjerg own goal, Paul. I don't have that video. I know you guys have asked me for a couple of videos. One is that, and the other one is the Ben White. I couldn't find them as videos, unfortunately, and I can't play the in-game stuff. Otherwise, there'll be a copyright issue. Someone I know sent me the other video that we played earlier, but this was delightful too because they were singing to him, Spurs fans, you let your country down, you let your country down. And then he delivers one of his best corners of the season, and Højbjerg puts it in the back of the net, and he gives the old ears, and of course then scored. Bukayo just on fire yesterday. Brilliant performance.
Yeah, his face gives you a clue there of the enjoyment, again, similar to Rice there. But no, the goal was a brilliant goal. If you look at the goal back, he's actually on the edge of the 18-yard box. Arsenal have everyone back from that corner because, you know, Tottenham were causing them problems. Not in open play from crosses, but in set plays would be a worry. But he's on the edge of the box, being responsible. I think it comes out, he sets it nicely, and then he really does trust that he can be found. He breaks on that right side. The pass, as you said, was beautiful. He's still got loads to do. You know, he's got one to beat and a recovering defender. He's travelled probably 70 yards up the field by now. But, I mean, only looking at it from Tottenham's point of view for 2 seconds, I mean, to let him back inside on his left foot's crime. You got to keep him. You got to keep him on his right foot there. But he knows exactly what he's doing. I think it's in his mind. The confidence is there. You know, it's in a massive game, and to show that composure, to feint, cut back inside, and you know, he didn't even have to look. He's probably done that in training so many times from that side coming in. It was a beautiful goal. A great goal in a massive moment for Arsenal.
He is growing up, and I do like to refer to him as a man now. He's not a boy anymore. But he is young, and the mentality that he has, when you think about the pressure that he has now because he's an elite player for England and he's chosen by England and his performances are judged. That Arsenal, he's carried the club, but finally has players around him where the onus doesn't have to be on him week in, week out, Paul, where he can have a poor game and Havertz will step up, or Martinelli or Odegaard or Declan Rice, you know, but we do need cover for him. And just before we switch gears a little bit, and I know Arsenal fans may not like this, but it was actually being talked about today by Darren Bent as well. And I thought to myself, for me, Premier League player and Premier League experience, Jarrod Bowen goes under the radar and he's very underrated in my opinion. And I just wondered what you thought about somebody like him, because look at Jorginho coming in, Premier League experience, Havertz coming in, Premier League experience, Trossard, the same. Gabriel Jesus, the same. Zinchenko, the same. I think it really matters. And maybe Jarrod Bowen will want to start week in, week out, but Arteta's convinced players to come and is going to have to continue to convince players to come, Paul, to be part of the project, much like Pep did at City. And he's seen the model of how Pep was able to do that. What's your take on Saka burnout? You know, the concern about that, and a player like Bowen, maybe that the club should be considering.
Yeah, well, you talk about City so there with Foden and Grealish, right? You've got Foden, but then you go and spend 100 million on Grealish. I mean, that is the level that you're up against. So to bring someone like a Bowen in would be a smart move. I think he's technically good, likes the ball into feet, scored 16 goals this season. You know, probably his best. I don't know for sure, but that is probably his best return.
It's the best in a West Ham season, I think, for a long time in the Premier League. Yeah.
Yeah, and also assists, right? So he makes goals. He made one at the weekend. He's got 6 assists. I'm massive on the numbers. You know, I really am, because I've always said, what can't speak, can't lie. And them numbers are important. And he's doing them in a West Ham shirt, where Moyes has spotted that he can go up top, right? But he's by trade, he's a wide man. But it shows how the game's evolving now, that anyone can play across the front. But yeah, I think he would be a really smart acquisition, because again, I don't know what you'd get him for, but you know, I think he'd want the move. And I think Rice going across, I mean, they obviously talk, players talk for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, sometimes I'd say, get in the ear of so-and-so for me, tell him how great we are, you know, because it helps. It helps. The players talking, it really does help. And yeah, I think staying in London as well would be appealing. And Bowen, and when you're signing players, so if you want them to have a hunger to go and win something, you know, I think you've got that with Rice, and I think Bowen would add to that.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting because for me and for a lot of Arsenal fans, you know, that particular position is key. We've got to take care of Saka at all costs, and I think it will help Saka's evolution as well. You know, we've seen young players be burnt out before. You know, then the injuries come, and it happened to Jack Wilshere. I mean, he broke at the Arsenal, completely broke. You know, it's a sad thing to see, and we want to make sure that we protect him. Okay, we're going to have Ben Jacobs join us in a little bit to talk about this spending cap, but we're going to keep rolling until Ben comes into the studio. Paul, I'm not one to look in the rearview mirror at all, but I often wonder how our season would have been if the midfield musketeers had played together for more than just the few smidgen of games that we've seen. Thomas Partey's come back in and has been brilliant. Martin Odegaard has been player of the season. It's a tough decision between him and Declan Rice. This is the midfield trio fans were hoping for. Absolutely dominant. You know, just the total cohesiveness. They play so well, you know, within their unit. Thomas Partey and what he provides for that back line, incredible. Rice gets a little bit more freedom. Odegaard does his thing. Do you think it would have been a little bit different for us had Thomas Partey been fit for most of the season? This is why some Arsenal fans are torn about keeping him and giving him more time, a new contract, versus letting him go and then he won't go for a free and banking what we can, you know, this summer. What's your take on that?
I do think it would have helped to have had Partey for the whole season, because the balance of the team looks really good. You know, sometimes you can look at it with different eyes, you know, individual players looking good, but they're a team in the end, and you need the balance. And also, it would have freed another attacking player up to be on the bench, right? So you'd be nice and solid. You can let your fullbacks go. All right, we know that Ben White maybe stays a little bit more on that side. It looks like a 3 sometimes, but yeah, having Partey there actually then frees Rice up to go and do what I believe he wants to do. He wants to go forward. I think he sees himself as that maybe old-fashioned box-to-box player, because he can do it, Rice. You'll see him going and join the attacks. He knows he's got the security behind him, Partey, and he's got that freedom to go, but he actually gets back in as well. And if you looked at Arsenal's shape at the weekend, it was very solid with those two in front of Saliba and Gabriel. And that's a very important part of the pitch. You know, you're now pushing the opposition wide. I mean, Tottenham didn't really go through the middle of Arsenal. Okay, I think the game plan was to allow, you know, if you're gonna have a route to goal, it's going to be from the wide areas, because they know how good they are in the middle defending the box. So I think in the modern game, the top teams will want to come through the middle of you, and you're not going to get that against the Arsenal when you've got those two sitting there. So I think it frees players up when you've got that stability, and you keep that solid unit in front of the back of the two centre backs. So yeah, I think that looked really good on the balance of things. I wasn't actually. I know what you're saying about Tomiyasu. I think Tomiyasu played well. I think he's a warrior and a fighter, but I just worried a few times on that side where, you know, a lot of balls come in where it probably didn't double up enough on that side against the ball, and he didn't really trust himself to get, you know, super tight on that side.
I want to get a little bit more on the back line in a minute. Stay tuned, you guys, because we're not done with our top 5 talking points with Paul Buckle, former Luton Town manager, and a regular that you love listening to his takes on, because he takes us into the inside the mind of the manager and beyond the white lines. We've talked about Kai Havertz. We've talked about our star man. We've talked about the midfield and what could have been. Still to come, we're going to talk about David Raya a little bit, and the magic of Benjamin White. And then we'll get Paul's take on our last games against Bournemouth, Manchester United, and of course, Everton. Joining the show right now on audio only, because he's on the road somewhere in the world, is sports journalist and writer Ben Jacobs. Ben, welcome to Squad Central.
Good evening. Glad to be here.
Thank you so much for jumping in. I saw the story break this morning and I'm like, right, I'm going to give Ben a little bell and see if he can join us to talk a little bit about, by the way, we've got Paul Buckle in the show as well, joining too. So the two of us here going to throw some questions at you. But before we do, why don't you try and summarize, because our listeners are really into this whole, you know, the FFP, what's been happening with Everton and Forest, of course, why it's going to take until 2025 for Manchester City's case to come forward. And now it seems like, interesting story. Some teams for this, some against, but a plan for a spending cap. Talk us through it.
So in layman's terms, a spending cap will be what's known as anchored. In other words, the clubs, if it's ratified in the summer, have agreed to effectively ratio what they can spend based upon what the bottom club earns in television rights times by a multiple. And that multiple is still to be agreed, but it might be around 5. And the feeling is that within the pyramid, this will stop somebody spending, even if they can within the financial rules, something so astronomical that those at the bottom of the Premier League are unable to compete. And when they do so, of course, like Chelsea have done over the past few windows, the market inflates, and that makes it harder and harder for the smaller clubs all the way down the pyramid, really, and in Europe, not just in the Premier League, to keep pace. So this is a manner of cap without capping individual player salaries and without making something so stringent that it would put off the big six. But of course, as you say, there was opposition from Manchester City, Manchester United, and Aston Villa, and Chelsea abstain. Now, these rules are not ratified yet, nor are the mechanics. And sources at the Premier League are quick to say that something that's been agreed in principle is more taking forwards a debate over the final legalities and the mechanism of this complicated ratio. So you take what the bottom club earns in television rights, you times it by something believed to be around 5, and that is the magic number that adds some kind of parity, but still perhaps gives clubs the freedom to have these big windows that we've seen from the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea over the course of the past few windows. And that's where we're at the moment. But the next step is, are the Premier League going to be able to get rules on paper in time for their AGM in June? And if they do so, it's likely the clubs will vote on it. And then if there's a 2/3 majority, these rules will come into force.
Wow. So to me, it sounds it's not entirely like the US sports model, which I know you know very well and you follow very well, because there are salary caps in US sports. So, for example, the competitiveness with, I mean, La Liga and Bundesliga and Serie A and Liga, maybe just PSG can pay those massive wages a week. It's not going to dampen, for example, the Haaland deal. Is that something under this new rule that would go through, because the salary cap for a player is not affected by this? This is more about the more fiscal, hierarchy, the club overall.
Yeah, exactly. What we're talking about in reality is clubs being able to move freely, and more so than profit and sustainability, but perhaps less so than under UEFA's so-called squad cost control measure. So again, in really simple terms, so as not to put people to sleep, you've got profit and sustainability, the Premier League's domestic version of financial fair play. And we know that you can make £105 million worth of losses over 3 years. And that doesn't fly with clubs like Everton and Nottingham Forest, but even the big six feel that in an inflated market, that number across 3 years doesn't allow them to get who they want. So the rules get changed. And for some reason, what hasn't been debated is just taking 105 million and maybe saying, what if it was 300 million? And I think that's just because it would be seen to encourage losses. Second option is what UEFA do under financial fair play, and that's a squad cost control measure. In other words, you can spend, in UEFA's percentage, 80% of the total revenue that you bring in on transfer fees, on agents' fees, and on wages. Now, if you took that 80% number, it might be 85 were the Premier League to adopt the rules, but they're going in a different direction. Then you look at the revenue of the clubs, and Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool and Chelsea are all bringing in excess of 500 million, and City and Manchester United are closer to 700 million. And that's only going to go up and up and up and up. So again, without doing exact maths, if it's 85% of that number or potentially around that, then as they get towards the billion mark, they'll be able to still spend astronomical sums. In this measure, because it's anchored against the bottom team and its revenue from television, it means that the number that the big clubs will be able to spend will be more around, if we did the maths now, and again, it can change with new deals and income and television rights, but if we did the maths now, it'd be more around the 450 to 500 million mark. So not quite the 700-800 that City, Manchester United, Liverpool, Spurs, Chelsea might be able to spend over time, but enough that they're going to feel like they can move freely in the market. And it adds a bit of parity to the league. So the smaller clubs will also feel that the bigger ones won't be able to continually and dramatically outspend them. So it feels like a compromise. It's somewhere in the middle between profit and sustainability and UEFA's squad cost control.
Wow. Paul, very interesting stuff. I'm going to lob in a couple of questions from our listeners for you here. MK, who's in Los Angeles, wants to know, Ben, what is being proposed, the soft cap, hard cap, or luxury tax?
Well, there's no luxury tax, and at the moment there's no soft or hard cap either. A luxury tax would effectively be if you're in breach of the rules, then you pay a fine in the most basic terms anyway, and then that would go into a pot and it would filter down the entire pyramid. But luxury tax is off the table, soft and hard caps as well in many ways. What we're talking about at the moment is a mechanism that ties the bottom club to the top club in the Premier League and ratios that by a multiple that is yet to be determined, coming up with something in the middle around that 400 or 500 million mark that will allow the big clubs to have big windows and the small clubs to be competitive. Now, if you breach it, we're speculating because at the moment, nothing's even been ratified. So when you ask, could the cap, when it's established, or even if it's established and voted for, could that result in a punishment? Well, yeah, of course. And will it be a hard one or a soft one? Will there be any leeway? These are all questions that the clubs will obviously have to debate, and different clubs will have different perspectives. And ultimately, when it goes to the final vote, you need that 2/3 majority. And when you're only agreeing things in principle, it's perhaps a bit easier for clubs to commit to it, but maybe they'll have more opposition when they start to read the small print and realize what the repercussions are if you breach it. And where we're at the moment is the Premier League's overarching belief remains that the tenants, and I'm sure the independent regulator will agree, that come with any charges and or punishments should stay the same. So that means things like fines, points deductions, and in a very, very extreme scenario, expulsion. So I would imagine that if there is a cap, it will be deemed to be relatively hard. And then beyond that, if there's any punishments, then there'll be the same kind of things that we're talking about now. Because obviously, if you remove points deductions or giant fines or any other threats, then clubs may see the rules, but where's their incentive to keep the rules? Because it may well be that breaching the rules has more benefit. So you just take the punishment because you realize that by breaking the rules, that's got you a big benefit. So there will be deterrence, and that will lean itself towards any caps should they emerge being hard, not soft ones. But all of these things are still to be discussed.
Paul, are you for this? If you're the manager of a Premier League team, are you for this?
I am if I'm down the bottom of that. If I'm outside of those maybe big six, I'm certainly glad you're leading this, Ben, and not me, because it's super complicated. You know, sometimes I'm in a room and I'm like, I tap out because it's not in my wheelhouse. But I don't know. I think there's two sides of it. I mean, these clubs that can bring in the revenue, it seems a bit unfair that they're being restricted, right? Not only obviously in the Premier League, but obviously in Europe to go and compete. Yeah, you don't want to see teams, overspend, get admins, but that is on that individual club. I feel like that club should be capable of running its own fiscal element of the club, and shouldn't need to be regulated as such like this. So it's super complicated to listen to. But I totally get it. If you're Manchester United, Chelsea, Man City, Arsenal, Liverpool, that you're worldwide, your brand, and you want to recycle that money into your team and into your squad. I see that then obviously not taking kindly to that.
Ben, a couple more questions for you. Do you have a couple more minutes? I know you're on the road to take a couple.
Of course.
Yeah.
Take
Okay, cool. So Wesbird wants to know, Ben, will this make it a fairer playing field financially?
Yeah, I think so, for the reasons that I've just discussed, because it doesn't quite allow the big six clubs carte blanche, but it evens things out. The other thing I would add and emphasize is when we're talking specifically about this system, should it be approved, we are talking about television revenue, not overall revenue. And it's fair in the sense that the TV deal is done and then it's filtered down. And obviously, the lowest earning Premier League club will receive one amount of television revenue, and then it will slide up the scale. So the clubs probably argue that the anchoring system is the fairest, because what we're not saying is Manchester City earn loads of non-TV money and why can't they spend it all? What this is saying is that the television money is distributed in a set way and everyone contributes, and the Premier League is the brand and all the clubs are a part of it. but it will obviously go on a sliding scale. So the lowest earning club of Premier League revenue becomes the anchor, but that specific revenue is ultimately everybody's revenue. And this is why I think the smaller clubs feel like there has to be something that restricts the bigger clubs, because in addition to getting large amounts of TV money, and it will always grow, the revenue that they have compared to, say, a newly promoted club is going to be so far greater, as is the wage capacity, as is the infrastructure, as are the training facilities, as are the fan base. So on the one hand, you could say, well, why can't they be rewarded for all of that? And in which case, the same clubs will always be in the same positions. Or you say, if the Premier League is truly competitive, where 20th can beat first, then you have to create a mechanism where that will always be the case. And anyone that's 20th, 19th, 18th at any point in the season feels like they've got the tools at their disposal, financially speaking, to compete with the big clubs. So this is how it's going to be trialed if it's ratified. And we wait and see whether eventually the big six say it is too restrictive still for us, and in 5-10 years time try and change it again, or whether this keeps the Premier League as a genuine league where all 20 teams can actually on their day put in a performance and have the quality to either win big games or cause upsets.
Brilliant stuff. You can follow Ben at Jacobs Ben. Just great stuff. Ben, do you promise to come back so we can talk about this as it progresses? And I'd love to get your take on a little bit of financial stuff as well before the summer transfer window kicks in. Listeners are really enjoying listening to you explain it so well, and it'd be great to have you back.
Yeah, of course. If you'll have me, if I've not sent people to sleep and bored them with this very dry topic, then I promise I'll come back on again.
No, brilliant stuff. Ben Jacobs, thank you so much for joining Squad Central. We really appreciate it. And be safe out there on your travels.
Thanks very much. All the best.
Thanks.
Bye.
Take care. Take care. Paul, my brain works in such creative ways. And as everyone knows here, I'm really rubbish at maths. I usually get Magic Mike to come in and talk about the financials and stuff like that. But very interesting the clubs that didn't go for this. And you said that you totally understand that. And Gunnar Russ, I know you put it in so many times. I'm going to bring him back on and we're going to talk about City in that case. And Ben will explain it all very well. I mean, it just seems egregious that Everton and Nottingham Forest battling for relegation and City, Paul, are just kind of carrying on like nothing's happened and we're not going to know until 2025.
Well, that's the worry. I mean, I think the worry with all of these things is, can they pull it off? Can they achieve what they're setting out to do? Is there loopholes? Are you going to be signing players for 8 years like Chelsea? I think that can, looking at that or how the teams are going to behave around something like this is just as important as actually putting this in, because you can end up doing more damage to the game and teams can end up falling. I think it is a worry for the teams down the bottom. It's a worry for any team when you get relegated. It's huge. You know, when them teams go down from the Premier League, you've got players that don't want to play in the Championship. You've got massive wage bill. Maybe the fan base has dropped off slightly. The money coming in, like you've got an umbrella payment for a bit, but no, or parachute payment. It's it's on the owner and the ownership, really. I feel, that owns the club, that, you know, to actually, you know, it's their club, they own it. It's up to them to do a real decent job with it. But in football, as we know, and this is why there's so many clubs available to buy, especially in the Championship and below, there's a gamble element to it all the time. You know, what do you spend? What's the trade-offs when you're spending all this money, and is it sustainable?
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, football's changing so much. One thing that doesn't change, though, is the Arsenal beating Tottenham in the North London Derby. Hope you enjoyed that little bit there with Ben as well. Let us know what you think in the YouTube comments. Ask any questions and we'll pass them on to him too. We'll keep the conversation going. It got a little bit scary. We've talked about David Raya and Ramsdale for a while. I think we put that conversation to bed, but my goodness, it felt like rewinding time and watching Ramsdale versus Southampton last season. Even though my heart sank to new levels of low, and I was thinking, oh, please don't do that. to him. Like, please don't let this be a collapse at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. This piece of art, courtesy of our friend Ruth Beck. And it was a howler. It was a moment of absolute madness, maybe a moment of arrogance, thinking he was going to squeeze the ball into Thomas Partey. But Paul, my goodness, Mikel Arteta hugged him afterwards. I don't know if we'd have drawn that game if he would have been hugging him at full time.
No, that was a worry. I mean, if you look at it, was the ball on? Not for me. There was way too many Tottenham players around Partey then. And he's actually then decided he's going to chip it with his left foot. Well, everybody knows you chip a ball, it's not going to get there in a hurry, and it would have just invited pressure. So the decision from Raya was awful. Poor decision to do that. There must have been spaces elsewhere with that many Spurs players in that vicinity of the pitch. So for me, the decision was wrong. The execution was certainly wrong. And I have no idea, even if he'd have got it into him, what Partey was meant to have done, because he couldn't turn and go forward. So he just, and he'd been so good. The one thing I've liked about Raya is he never takes a liberty with time. So when the ball comes back to him, it's out of his feet. You know, he looks sharp. He's kicked a lot, actually. He's kicked long a lot, and he's mixed it up well. That was the wrong decision, and that did cost Arsenal. And that did invite pressure, and you won't want to be doing that anymore for the rest of the season, because you won't get away with it next time.
Yeah, I agree with Barry. After he made the mistake, he was superb. The dominance in the box, coming in for crosses, he really, I think, helped bring back that confidence, because it's easy for us to go low. But once again, I think we proved that our mentality has shifted a gear, Paul, and that we've upped our game. Because 2 seasons ago, Arsenal could have easily have drawn or even lost that game. Okay, a couple of quick ones before we get Paul out of here as well. Benjamin White, a player that Arsenal fans have totally fallen in love with. We saw this from him against Chelsea in the week. It was just brilliant. He is and has grown for me as one of the most improved players at the club. The defense alongside, Saliba and Gabriel. We talked about Tomiyasu. You had some concerns about him, but Jurriën Timber coming back, I think, is going to be massive for us. Benjamin White, what he does with the goalkeeper, he puts so much pressure on the goalkeeper without fouling the goalkeeper. Is this something Arteta has taught him? Is this something that he has in him? And also, he was trying to take the Velcro off Vicario's glove, which was just brilliant. I mean, I love the guy. We all love the guy. Is that something that maybe Arteta saw in his game and is telling him do that more? Because the dark arts, I thought Kai was good at the dark arts, but I think Ben is now the king of dark arts at the Arsenal.
He certainly is. And when you're setting up for a corner, I would always say to my striker, or I never sent the back pinning in, I'd have them attacking the ball. Be smart. Don't be interested in the keeper too early, right? Stay away from it. And right at the last minute, just arrive in front of him, because it's a real art, especially now. You block him, you have your arms up. They're gonna give a free kick. It's easy you make it easy for the ref. He's just gonna give a free kick the other way. White is very smart. He's smooth. He's crafty. He just arrives at the right time. The spacing's perfect. And to allow that ball to get in such a dangerous position, I would have been fuming if I was in the Spurs dugout, because they must have seen him do it. And the one thing you can't allow is your goalkeeper to get pinned. In the pro game, it's a no-no. So you'd have had somebody, especially at home, drag him out of the way, push him away from, but he does it so well that he just arrives at the last minute. But I would have hoped at that level they could have countered that tactically and say, look, we know what he's going to do. He'll hang around, then he'll step in. But yeah, doing the Velcro is a new one.
It was great.
Remember that. But no, I'm sure now in these last few games, so that the opposition will be looking at that. But it is a really important job, because if you get it wrong, you've wasted the opportunity. But to allow the minute that ball goes into that area for the players Arsenal have and the way they attack it, it's golden.
Brilliant stuff. Yeah, he was just great. Real quick, before we get on to some of the, I'm going to wrap up because we're going to wrap up all the questions in a couple of questions I'll ask on behalf of the squaddies. Where is it? I wanted to know, a penalty for you, this? Oof, that looks really painful. Was that a penalty for you?
It is because one, he doesn't get the ball, kicks through the back. The way it is now, you just got to be so careful in the box now. You've got to be so good at your trade defensively now. It's a lash out to clear the ball or whatever it is, but it is a penalty for me.
Okay, just for you, here's that picture, and I'll ask Paul the next question. Do you think Manchester City are going to drop any points, Paul? That is the overwhelming question from all the squaddies in the chat for you.
Well, if you look at the game against Forest, it's the most I've seen a team get to City's goal.
How did he not score, Paul?
How they didn't score, I don't know. I mean, this is the pressure. Forest need it for different reasons. The pressure's there. You're playing the champions. But I've always said this, like when you're a head coach, or you're coaching a team, how many times do they arrive at your goal and how many times do you arrive at their goal? The rest you can't really affect because that's on people finishing, for example, right? But I'm not sure Pep would be happy with that, how many times Nottingham Forest got to the final third and got a good sight of the goal, and that should encourage the Arsenal fans. It should encourage the Arsenal players. This title race is far from done. Absolutely far from done. I think they can drop points. I think that shows it. Yeah, Haaland off the bench. I mean, what a substitute to have coming on, scoring with his right foot. They actually showed him the right way, and he still scored. But no, that'll give them hope. It should give Arsenal hope, the fans as well. And you just hope Tottenham, not going to say do you a favour, but do it right. Go and give everything, because Tottenham's front line can cause any team problems, and also from set plays. So I still think there's a rick in Man City. I do.
Man, I like it. I like your train of thought. I like the way you're thinking. Okay, well, May is up, and may the force be with Arsenal for sure. Bournemouth, Manchester United and Everton. How many points do you see the Arsenal getting from these last 3 games, Paul?
God, what a question. Well, how many games did you say is left? 3.
And we've got to go to Old Trafford, and we're at home against Bournemouth and home against Everton. In fact, the last day of the season, all three teams, I mean, if you can include Liverpool still, why not, are playing at home.
I've got to be honest. I really think you're going to need 9.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. I think you can get 9. I think you can. They're all winnable games. Looking at Arsenal and what you've done so far this season, they're winnable. Manchester United are all over the place at times. I mean, you never know what you're going to get from them. And they've still got to play City, have they or not? Have they got City?
No, Manchester United have to play. City have to play Wolves. They have to play Tottenham. And squaddies, help me out with the other 2 games that they have. West Ham, I think they've got to play City on the last day of the season. They've got the game in hand, of course, but
and West Ham. Okay, so I've said all along it's Arsenal's title.
Fulham, thank you, PW. Fulham is the other game I was missing.
Yeah, I think it's Arsenal's title. I think they're going to win their remaining games. And I'm a great believer in law of averages as well. I think City I think something's going to happen, and they're going to lose a game, and Arsenal are going to win it. And I've been sure of that for quite a while. I've got to be honest, before that Forest game, I was thinking a bit different, because I thought I'd go City again. But I think all Arsenal can do is look after themselves. They've just come for a huge win. I mean, that's a massive win at Tottenham. I mean, City would have been looking at that thinking Arsenal could come unstuck here, and they haven't. So we're on to the next one now. So it's all in the head now. Everything will be here for the players. And I think that maybe David Raya doing what he did will absolutely focus him even more. And Ben White's got a few more tricks up his sleeve on them corners.
Yeah. Took a deep breath there. Yeah, listen, I can't believe, I honestly thought Forest were going to get a point out of that game. If Chris Wood's finishing was just a tad better, they hit the bar. He missed 2 absolute sitters. And they had those chances, Paul, which are finite. And then Pep did what Pep does. He tweaked it. You know, he brought Kovacic on, he brought Haaland on, he switched Bernardo, and that was it. That was the window. You only get one window, and Forest blew it. But my goodness, credit to them. They really gave City a game. And if that West Ham shows up and that Spurs show up, I mean, and Fulham, who beat us twice this season, you know, anything is possible.
Yeah, I mean, so from that, I haven't dived in tactically on what Nottingham Forest did, but I tell you what, if I'm any one of them teams that are going to go to City, that's where my analysis will be right now, to see how they managed to get to City's goal and in the attacking third on a regular basis, right? For a team that's down the bottom, how was they able to do that? How was they able to get free hits into the box for those opportunities? And that's what I think the analysis guys will be doing in them teams that have got to face City at the end of the season. And teams that haven't got anything to play for, we always know they can be dangerous.
Do you think, I thought the opposite. Look at Brighton folded like a cheap sun chair on the pier against City. They didn't show up at all. In fact, I thought they were embarrassing. West Ham, credit to them for the way they played against Liverpool at the weekend. I wasn't expecting that either, especially with what's happening with Moyes and stuff. You know, it's interesting that you say that.
Well, if Bowen wants to move to Arsenal, you know what he's got to do.
Shop window. Brilliant stuff from Paul. As per usual, thanks so much for being my wingman and co-host. I love having you on the show. The squaddies love your perspective and how you take us into the mind of the manager. Follow Paul on Instagram at @buckle_Paul. And you will not be disappointed. And Paul, we'll see you again on the show very, very soon. I'm trying to set up the Rebecca Henry Winter reunion, by the way. I was thinking maybe throw in Ornstein into the mix as well. What a show that will be.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, it could be an upgrade, squaddies, from me.
We love you.
Love to Kev as well.
Yeah. Thanks so much. And keep the love coming for Paul, for Paul for sure, and for Super Kev. He's watching the show and in recovery. And as you know, it's been a bit of a long road back for our Super Kev. So please do keep showing him the love. He's watching and he's thankful for all of the lovely messages that he's getting from you. Okay, squaddies, there'll be more live shows this week. Keep following us on the community page and on Twitter as well. We're going to have a women's show this week. We've got Jonathan Tannenwald from the Philadelphia Inquirer joining us as well this week for a look at the global game and some other bits and pieces happening in football and a whole bunch of other stuff going on too. So don't miss out. Quality guests on this channel, as you know. And as Super Kev would always say, don't forget to tell your loved ones you love them. And don't forget to go and visit Zenith Coins for 10% off your North Bank coin. At ease, squaddies, at ease.
Mind the gap between the train and the platform. Please stand clear of the discussion doors. The next stop is Highbury Squad.
You know what I've decided to do? I'm going to play this one more time on the way out. Why not? Super Kev will love it. Here we go. I might just keep playing it. One more time. For those listening on the audio platform, it is the cannon shooting the cockerel. And yeah, why not? Hey, why not? Take care, everyone. Yeah, sure, why not? Why not? One more time on the way out.